Amazing transformation. Mother surprises everyone by feeding her daughter only once a month here. Sarah's unconventional parenting choice rippled through the small Midwestern town like a stone tossed into a pond, stirring disbelief and judgment. Every whispered word, what kind of mother forces her daughter to fend for herself, gnawed at her insides. As she drove home from another long day at the diner, her mind raced with the consequences of her decision. Each time she saw Lily poring over her science textbook or crafting meals out of pantry scraps, the bitter taste of doubt clawed at her throat. She wanted to prepare her daughter for a world that was always stacking odds against them. Yet was she really teaching resilience or merely courting neglect? The weight of bills loomed like an endless storm cloud. They were always behind, each notice a reminder of how precarious their situation had become. The threat of foreclosure hung heavier than even her meager earnings could lift. And here she was in struggle over decisions that could be seen as reckless. Forcing Lily to make her meals plentiful once a month felt dismal. It was a gamble for survival that only a desperate mother would take. Could thinned resolve for nourishment really cultivate strength? Each time she thought it might, the rising tide of anxiety crushed her better judgment. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the days crept by, Sarah's resolve frayed. The laughter that once filled their home seemed to evaporate, replaced by an ominous silence that cloaked every corner. Each time Lily concocted a makeshift meal from flour and water, ingeniously turning zucchini into a pasta substitute, Sarah felt a flicker of pride, mingling with unease. What did it mean to be a warrior of sustenance, and yet be devoid of love? She could see the sparkle of intellect in her daughter's eyes, but she also recognized the profound loneliness creeping in, catching Lily's shoulders in its grasp like a vice. With the science fair approaching, tension mounted at home. It wasn't just the expectations from the small-town crowd that bore down on her. Fearing judgment from neighbors felt like a noose tightening around her throat. As they prepared, Sarah's heart raced, guilt tangling with flickers of stubborn pride. Was she commodifying hard work? Had her ambitious experiment turned into a masquerade of hardship? Anguish knotted in her stomach as she pondered the fine line between resilience and neglect. How close could she tread before the scales tipped irreversibly? Then came the disastrous evening that shattered her resolve. A sudden drop in work hours led to a new, terrifying reality. Bills overdue, barely any food, and Lily's first indignant glance as she confronted her mother in their dimly lit kitchen. "Mom, I am hungry." The words tore through the air, a plea trapping Sarah in a fog of dread. The walls seemed to close in around her, the weight growing unbearable. Stranded between her convictions and the stark reality of their lives, she faced the painful realization that love alone might not be enough. Would Lily forgive her when she saw not just a mother's determination, but a child's hunger? With Lily's plea echoing in her ears, Sarah felt a chasm open up within her, the fracture sharper than ever. She stared blankly at the half-empty kitchen, the sparse shelves mocking her inability to provide basic comfort. How could her dreams of instilling strength create a hollow home? The balance between love and discipline she wished to cultivate was crumbling like the dried pasta left in the cupboard. Seconds felt like hours as uncertainty engulfed her. The idea of continuing her experiment had once felt revolutionary, even commendable. Now, it appeared foolish, bordering on cruel. Misguided impetus had led her to this moment, and Sarah found herself grappling with the gravity of her choices. Her first instinct was to push back, to remind Lily of the numerous skills she had developed through this unconventional path. But there, amid the dim light flickering over their sparse table, she sensed the unmistakable residue of guilt pooling. She was not just a mother, she was also a provider, and she had failed in that fundamental role. Without even concocting a response, she realized she needed to reevaluate everything. The weight of consequence pressed upon her, driving Sarah to confront her reality. Financial desperation had fueled her parenting choices, but the ripple effects were wrapping tighter around their lives. With the science fair days away, the pressure was becoming unbearable. Would it not show the community what truly mattered? Was there a chance to refocus and turn this vulnerability into a demonstration of resilience that wouldn't come at the cost of Lily's health? Pulling herself together, she decided on a change. The insecurities gnawing at her would not determine their path forward. She needed to dive into a solution rather than drown in uncertainty. With clarity seeping in, she grabbed a pen and paper, letting the uncertainty transform into a plan. Could she negotiate more hours at the diner? Perhaps lean on neighbors for temporary assistance, even if it meant swallowing her pride? There was still time to mend what felt irreparable. Lily remained silent, observing her mother with cautious hope. Sarah felt the flicker of a spark ignited by that gaze. They were in this together, anchored by shared hardship. If she could reconfigure her approach, even with the limitations they faced, perhaps she could lead by example, showcasing what resilience truly looked like not just for the town, but for herself. That night, Sarah sat in a web of possibilities, scribbling ideas like a frantic artist before a deadline. Meal prep plans danced in her mind. Strategies for negotiating shifts coursed through her thoughts. This time, she wouldn't find herself on an isolated path. Sarah realized that the strength she yearned to impart to Lily was best demonstrated through collaboration, a solution-oriented mindset where both would thrive. No longer a solitary warrior, she embraced vulnerability as companion unity. The resolve forming within her began to shift the internal narrative. But just as she found a flicker of hope, a thought punctured her newfound clarity. What if the town's judgment carried heavier consequences than she anticipated? How would she handle their scrutiny when her plans became visible, forcing her to lay bare the choices she had made? The next day brought an unexpected opportunity, a flyer from a local community group seeking resources for underprivileged families and mothers in need. Perhaps this was the avenue she required. With a deep breath, Sarah prepared to face the incoming tide of vulnerability as she stepped forward, knowing change demanded courage, and reckoning was always an option close at hand. What awaited her beyond that door? Would their shared struggle build the foundation for a new chapter, or would it cement the cacophony of doubt? Only one way to find out. The shifting light of dawn crept through the kitchen window, casting a hopeful glow over the remnants of a half-done meal plan sprawled across the table. Sarah felt a trembling anticipation within her, instincts igniting as she pieced together her thoughts. The flyer, brightly printed with the words support and empowerment, seemed to leap from the desk to her mind. This could be more than just a resource, this was a lifeline. After reassuring Lily with a soft morning smile, Sarah embraced the day with a singular focus. The once dismal kitchen began to feel less like a battleground of shortcomings and more like a launch pad for potential change. She had decisions to make and choices to act upon. How could she approach this community group? What could she offer, and what could she ask in return? Every detail mattered, and she immersed herself in a whirlwind of planning. Walking to the community center that morning, weariness clung to her like a second skin, yet behind it was an invigorating sense of purpose. Each step shed the veil of self-doubt, if only momentarily. An unexpected wave of confidence surged within her. Perhaps she wasn't merely walking into a meeting, she was stepping into a space where vulnerability was transformed into strength and community flourished through collective experiences. Upon her arrival, the community center buzzed with the chatter of mothers, children, and volunteers. As Sarah navigated the sea of faces, she grasped the stark contrast between camaraderie and isolation that had characterized her recent journey. Each person she encountered bore stories of struggle and triumph. It was a reminder she wasn't alone, not only in her challenges, but in her ambitions as well. When called upon during the meeting to introduce herself, fear licked at her throat. But as she spoke, fear started to morph into something else. "I'm Sarah," she began, her voice steady by purpose. "I'm here to seek guidance, not just for myself, but for my daughter." She caught sight of Lily in the back, her eyes wide and attentive. That quick glance fortified Sarah's resolve. She had a visible reminder of why she was there. The discussion swirled around her, tackling issues she had grappled with for far too long: budgeting, meal planning, emotional well-being. Each shared story painted a mosaic of challenges faced by mothers striving to provide, to protect, and to empower their children. Sarah felt herself weaving into that collective fabric, her experience no longer a solitary narrative, but part of a broader discussion that held transformative potential. But within her newfound comfort, a realization began to crystallize. While she sought resources and advice, she also held something of value to offer, perspectives shaped by her journey, emphasizing resilience born from adversity. How could she contribute uniquely to this community? Ideas started to unfurl in her mind, urging her to break free from the confines of mere participant to that of a contributor. After the meeting, Sarah approached one of the facilitators. "Would it be possible for me to share some insights on parenting strategies at the next gathering?" she asked, emboldened by the collective support that had enveloped her. The facilitator's surprised nod unlocked a door Sarah hadn't realized had been ajar. As the plan took shape, a spark of determination ignited within her. She could start laying down the framework of a workshop, a space where mothers could gather, share strategies, and build each other up. Just as she had once sought collaboration, now she would spearhead it, transforming vulnerability into empowerment. Her thoughts raced as possibilities threatened to spiral out of control. What if she failed? What if her plans fell flat? Such questions clung to her mind, but Sarah found solace in their uncertainty. The growth she had already experienced had fortified her spirit. She would turn the fear of judgment inside out to create a shield against doubt. Back at home, the kitchen felt different. It buzzed with a potential previously masked by shame and scarcity. For the first time in months, Sarah tackled meal prep with a newfound zest, envisioning the shared strength she hoped to promote. But just as promise began to bloom, doubt crept in alongside her momentum. Was she truly ready for this next step, or was she simply setting herself up for further disappointment? There were still looming questions regarding public perception, expectations, and whether she could balance everything while ensuring Lily's needs were met. With the weight of expectation clashing against her hope, Sarah took a deep breath, framing her thoughts around the possibilities ahead. Could this truly be the turning point she desperately needed? And as she stared at the unlit stove, she understood one essential truth would define her journey. Change was not just about the choices she made, but how she embraced the uncertainty that would come with those choices. What would tomorrow hold? Would her stumbling steps lead to liberation or fracture once more? Only one way to find out. Standing at the kitchen counter, Sarah gathered the remnants of her meal prep, yet the sprawling ingredients felt like an ensemble cast in her internal play of transformation. Each item on the counter seemed to symbolize something more than sustenance. It represented her burgeoning desire to take ownership of her life. Determination mingled with apprehension. Behind the gleaming flicker of ambition lurked the frail shadow of self-doubt. She began to chop, slicing through carrots with a precision that mirrored her focus. The rhythm of the knife against the cutting board became a mantra, drowning out the doubts that threatened to resurface. Could she really do this? Was organizing a workshop a step forward, or merely another evasion of her larger issues? Each question echoed in her mind, demanding attention like persistent critics in the back row of a theater. As she worked, memories of her own childhood drifted in. The warm aroma of a home-cooked meal had once felt like a sanctuary. But those experiences had faded into a blur of unfulfilled expectations. Sarah yearned to reshape that narrative for Lily, to cultivate an atmosphere of empowerment and hope. What lessons had she learned, after all? It wasn't simply about delivering meals. It was about acceptance, resilience, and the acknowledgement that every mistake could offer a new perspective. What if she created the workshop, not just to give, but to learn and grow? The idea ignited a flicker of excitement. By sharing her journey, she could frame her struggles as shared stepping stones for others, perhaps offering insights she had yet to comprehend fully. With a plan forming, she decided to reach out to some mothers she had met during the meeting. Their stories had carved out a sense of community that was electric, each anecdote a charge boosting her resolve. But deep within, another set of worries surfaced. Were her experiences relatable? Would they perceive her strategies as misguided? The fear of inadequacy snagged at her enthusiasm like a thorn in her side. Pushing those thoughts aside, a new intent emerged. I can start small, she whispered to herself, a reflection meant to validate her hesitations rather than dismiss them. Instead of a large workshop, perhaps informal meetups in her home could initiate dialogue, a safe space for mothers to share ideas, insecurities, and exchange strategies. If she built from the foundation of honesty and mutual respect, maybe that would cultivate the camaraderie she longed for. Smoothing her palms against the counter, she felt the coolness of the marble beneath her fingers. The environment felt charged, the kitchen a testament to her evolving state. She could easily visualize their laughter, bonds being formed over pots of simmering broth, connections strengthened over slices of bread. Each gathering could become a fertile ground for healing, an opportunity to grow from their struggles together. Yet, as reality crept back in, a shade of apprehension swept through her. What if they viewed her efforts as naive? Would her home become a target for critiques rather than a refuge? With every new idea blossoming like budding flowers, those thorns of doubt threatened to choke the optimism out. Taking a breath, she focused on what lay ahead. Each brush of doubt could be seen as a challenge rather than a barrier. The journey would not merely be about the workshops, but about redefining her own self-perception, proving that she was more than her past mistakes. With a renewed determination, she grabbed her phone and began drafting a message to the mother she had met. Blood thrummed in her ears as she hovered over the send button, willing herself to act instead of retreat. This could easily be the tide that shifts her course, a playful dance with the uncertainty that had haunted her. But as she leaned back, heart racing, the nagging question loomed larger than life. What if this willingness to open her home to others became a reflection of her own vulnerabilities? Was she ready to carry that weight while nurturing her own insecurities? The thought sparked an inner chaos that dictated her next movement. She had glimpsed a path toward empowerment, but now the true test lay ahead, understanding whether the workshop would indeed symbolize a stepping stone or an exposure of her hidden fears. Would she emerge stronger, or would this endeavor prove to be yet another misstep in her relentless pursuit for self-worth? Only time, and her willingness to confront the unknown, would tell. Sarah's finger hovered over the send button, her pulse thundering in her ears like a drum echoing through an empty hall. The simple act of sending a message felt monumental, a definitive moment that could shape her reality. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, the room around her dissolving into shadows. They all seemed to swim before her, faces bearing expressions of support, skepticism, and apathy. What if they laughed at her? What if they ignored her? Or worse, what if they showed up and she fumbled? She was about to expose her heart, and that made her breath quicken with anxiety. Each second felt like an eternity, fluctuating between courage and crippling self-doubt. Then, with a swift motion fueled by an unexplainable determination, she pressed send. As the message sailed through the digital ether, an unexpected calm settled over her. Maybe this was the first of many leaps toward honesty, both with herself and others. Was vulnerability really a weakness? She felt the heaviness of that question as it dripped into her mind, pooling in the crevices of her thoughts. In the days that followed, her phone buzzed with replies. A wave of acceptance washed over her. Women were eager, willing to gather in a space that felt warm and inviting. It seemed that they, too, shared her trepidation, their words enveloping her like a comforting blanket. This new community forming felt like a safe cocoon around her exposed self. Yet each glowing message simultaneously heightened her apprehension about preparing for their first meeting. With each response, ideas about how to organize her meetup sprang up. Should she create an agenda, or let the conversations flow naturally? Perhaps cooking together would establish a relaxed atmosphere after the inevitable initial awkwardness. Planning gave her purpose, but it also became stressful. Was it presumptuous to think they would want to do what she was proposing? Days turned into frantic nights of preparation. Sarah navigated the anxiety, losing sleep over the little details. The layout of the kitchen, the recipes, the snacks, even the kind of music that might play softly in the background. Her mind raced, contemplating 1,000 different scenarios about how the meeting might unfold. The day finally arrived, and her home transformed from a sanctuary into a stage, each corner meticulously arranged. She reviewed everything for the umpteenth time, cut vegetables, a simmering pot on the stove, handwritten notes at the ready. Still, the specter of inadequacy lingered at the periphery of her thoughts. As the first knock resonated through the house, anxiety seared through her body. She opened the door, revealing familiar faces, yet they were all so much more than acquaintances now. Each mother stepped inside, and as they filled the space with laughter and warmth, an awakening unfolded within Sarah. If they were to share a meal, then perhaps, just perhaps, she could share her own story. As they congregated around the table, she felt the collective energy shift from nervousness to openness. Each shared anecdote became a lifeline, drawing them nearer. It was more than a workshop. It became a fragile tapestry woven from the shared threads of their struggles. Yet, as light filtered through the window, illuminating their faces, Sarah felt a flicker of doubt ignite once more. She lingered on the brink of vulnerability, aware that revealing her past would unearth the very insecurities she had been fighting to bury. Was she truly ready to strip away her layers, to expose the messy journey that had brought her here? "I've been thinking about some of our challenges as mothers," she began, her voice steady yet tentative. "And I want to share something personal with you all." Her words hung in the air, the weight of her unfinished thoughts hanging like a taut string ready to snap. Would her honesty foster further connection, or would it alienate her newfound friends? As Sarah prepared to dive deeper into her narrative, the room fell into silence, the kind poised on the edge of revelation. Would this meeting ignite a deeper understanding, or would it unravel the threads they had worked so hard to weave? A knot formed in her stomach as anticipation clawed at her mind. There was no turning back now. With each breath, she faced the uncertain territory ahead, poised on a precipice between fear and growth. The outcome remained unclear. The moment felt electric. This was only the beginning. The silence in the room stretched, wrapping around Sarah like a thick fog. Confronted with an ocean of faces leaning in with a mix of curiosity and empathy, she felt both buoyed and burdened. She could hear the hum of her heartbeat thrumming in her ears, drowning out the softer sounds of the world outside. It was as if the entire universe had paused, waiting for her next words, a delicate moment loaded with potential. Facing fears head-on was supposed to be empowering, yet as she hesitated, she felt the heavy weight of vulnerability press down on her chest. But now was the time. She had reached a juncture where either she could share her truth or let the moment slip away into the realm of what-ifs. Sarah inhaled, her breath trembling ever so slightly, then exhaled, pushing the weight of her apprehension aside. "I want to be open with all of you," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I've struggled with feelings of inadequacy as a mother. The doubt, the pressure, it's all been overwhelming." As her words tumbled out, she was met with nods of understanding, warm smiles, and knowing glances that broke her tension just enough for her to continue. "There was a time when I felt completely isolated, like I was failing at everything. And to be honest, I still sometimes think I am." She paused, searching the faces before her for support. "But maybe that's the heart of the problem. I've been measuring my worth against unrealistic expectations." As she spoke, she surprised herself with the vulnerability flowing from her words. Each confession, each crack in her facade, revealed a broken past that felt heavier than she had anticipated. Yet instead of judgment, she found camaraderie. One by one, her newfound companions began to share their journeys, weaving their own threads of self-doubt, fear, and hopes into the growing tapestry they were creating together. The kitchen atmosphere shifted, becoming an even more sacred space for sharing hardships. They were no longer just women cooking together. They were forging connections deeper than they could comprehend. But as their stories piled upon one another, revealing scars of motherhood and the longing for validation, a shadow loomed within Sarah. The fear that had been a subtle undercurrent now surged to the forefront of her mind. What if her truths were too raw? What if peeling back these layers only exposed fragility? Sarah felt the temperature in the room drop as she prepared to reveal the darker parts of her journey. Years ago, I lost track of who I was outside of being a mother. I let the pressures consume me. I would label my worth based on how well I could manage laundry and school schedules, as if that defined me. She felt the edges of her voice quiver. What I had to confront was that I had been neglecting my own needs, my own identity. Her heart raced, both terrified and electrified by the release of these words. Would they still see her as someone capable, or would they view her merely as a failure in their eyes? The initial wave of connectedness now mingled with a new wave of fear, diluting her clarity. Was she exposing too much too soon? Yet, amid the swirling chaos of her thoughts, a remarkable realization took shape. Vulnerability didn't equal weakness. Perhaps it was the bridge to true connection, the very thread that could stitch together what they had all shared in silence. As Sarah finished her more profound revelation, she found herself visibly shaking from the emotional surge. The shared space crackled with energy, anticipation lingering in the air, questions left unanswered, connections deepened, and veils lifted. Just as the atmosphere began to settle, one of the other mothers leaned forward, her brow furrowed with concern. "But what do we do with those feelings, Sarah?" she asked, her voice steady yet filled with empathy. "How do we navigate these challenges without spiraling into despair?" Sarah's breath hitched at the unexpected weight of the question. The journey ahead was far from over, and suddenly she felt drawn into a new challenge, a sense of responsibility forming around her shoulders like a cloak. It wasn't only about being honest. It was about finding a way forward together, deciding on actionable steps that could help them all thrive. That crucial moment unshackled her from self-doubt, but locked her into the need for accountability. With the sun shining brightly outside, inviting and warm, Sarah suddenly felt a shift, realizing she had to confront not just her fears, but the very fabric of their support network. What if we explored these feelings together? She proposed, a new determination igniting within her. What if we created a space that allowed us to address these challenges head-on? Not just here, but as we move forward. How do we take this deeper? Her voice had strengthened, daring to connect a thread of shared agency. As the women around the table reflected on this proposition, Sarah felt a wave of determination course through her. She was no longer just revealing her vulnerabilities. She was beginning to forge a path. But what the women may not have realized was that Sarah was also crafting a roadmap for herself, a journey into uncharted territory, filled with potential obstacles. Each step she took from here on out would require immense courage. As they all nodded in agreement, a new dynamic began to weave itself into the fabric of their circle. But in her core, Sarah could feel the tether tugging her back to the truth she had barely begun to confront. Would she be able to move forward and define her purpose beyond the walls of her home and the definitions she had long held? The possibility shimmered just out of reach, beckoning her toward an uncertain future. An inexplicable sense of urgency surged within her. She had opened a door, and in doing so, she had to confront its thresholds. There was more to discover, more revelations lying in wait both for her and her companions. And as the discussion circled back to the heart of motherhood's complexity, The lingering question settled in her mind. Where would this new path lead her next? Sarah couldn't shake the electric buzz buzzing in her chest as they embarked on this new phase. The women had agreed to explore their feelings together, and that sense of camaraderie felt like a lifeboat thrown into turbulent waters. Yet, the more they discussed the idea, the more she realized that the art of accountability required more than just words. It required action. They decided to meet weekly, a commitment that unsettled her. Each gathering would be a place to sift through their doubts and aspirations, fostering a support system that each of them had long needed. But could she keep her part of the promise? That question gnawed at her, a small seed of self-doubt buried deep in her mind. In the following days, Sarah spent a sleepless night drafting a plan. What would their gatherings look like? How could she facilitate these discussions without imposing her own fears? The prospect felt like both a thrill and a daunting challenge. She wanted to provide a space where every woman felt heard, but that meant confronting her own tendency to dominate conversations with her worries. Her mind raced with lists and ideas, but as she created her outlines, another truth unfolded. She didn't have to resort to perfectionism. The same pressures that had suffocated her in motherhood were now trying to invade this new venture. It was important for her to remind not just herself, but the group that imperfection was acceptable. After a few days of anxious planning, their first meeting arrived like an impending exam. Sarah could feel her palms sweat as she arrived at the designated space, a cozy nook in her living room cluttered with papers and remnants of snack wrappers from her daughter's last playdate. The other mothers were warm and inviting, yet Sarah sensed the weight of responsibility looming over her. She could hardly articulate her thoughts as they settled in. The initial awkwardness of small talk darkened her anxiety. What if she failed them? But as they began to open up about their own struggles, fears of judgment from both their children and society, feelings of isolation, and the burden of expectations, it dawned on her. She was encouraging dialogue, and they reciprocated eagerly. Sarah's role had shifted from just a participant to a facilitator, and it felt liberating to weave their narratives into something collective. Midway through, one of the mothers, a woman named Michelle, voiced something deeply personal, her voice wavering. I feel like I'm nothing when I look at Instagram. I see these perfect families, and I wonder where I went wrong. It was a sentiment that echoed loudly within the room, and Sarah noticed other nods of agreement. How do we stop the comparison? Another woman asked, her brow furrowed. The question lingered in the air, heavier than before. In that moment, Sarah realized the crux of their meetings could pivot on accountability, but it also needed to foster a culture of gratitude for their individual lives, imperfections, and the beautiful chaos that came with motherhood. What if each week ended with them sharing one thing they appreciated about themselves or their lives? That could shift perspective. It was a start, a glimpse into redefining their self-worth based on something other than societal standards. As she pitched the idea, her words were met with enthusiastic agreement. In this unguarded moment, a splash of relief washed over her. She was no longer a solitary figure carrying the weight of her own inadequacies. She was part of a mosaic of shared experiences. By the time the meeting wrapped up, a surge of hope and empowerment filled the room. They agreed to bring a list of their strengths next week, both as an exercise in recognition and a means to combat their internal critics. Sarah felt exhilarated, as though she had cracked open a window to fresh air after being stuck in a stuffy room. Yet, beneath the bubbling enthusiasm lay the unresolved tension of her own self-worth journey. While the women began to leave, she lingered in that space as they all chatted and laughed. The nagging voice within warned her that she had only begun to scratch the surface of her personal challenges. Tomorrow, she would confront more than just her role in the group. She would have to delve into her own measurements of success beyond motherhood. The fleeting joy of their gathering didn't erase the deeper questions simmering in her mind about her abilities and purpose. As she tightened the laces on her shoes, a familiar sense of determination coursed through her anew. It was time to delve into the vision She held for herself a vision painted much broader than laundry schedules or meal plans. The stakes were rising. She had initiated change, not only for her friends but for herself. And with that understanding ignited inside her, another question emerged. Could the women's shared experiences eventually lead her to rediscover her intrinsic self-worth while nurturing the connection with her daughter? That new path beckoned, teetering on the edge of her consciousness like an uncharted map waiting to be explored. The following morning, Sarah awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. After a restless night of contemplation, the soft morning light filtering through her curtains felt almost symbolic of her emerging clarity. She glanced at her phone. The message from Michelle, thanking her for last night, was still fresh in her mind. Encouragement from others was vital, but it could only sustain her for so long. The real challenge lay in the depths of her own self-perception. As she sat with her coffee, the mundane action of sipping felt weighted now. She wasn't just a mother or a facilitator of group dynamics. She could be something more. The implications of that thought conjured a slew of questions that felt heavier than the aroma wafting from her mug. Who was Sarah when the roles of wife and mother faded? The chaos of familial life had often swallowed her identity. Resentment over that lost space began to rear its head, pushing at the edges of her mind like a caged animal desperate for freedom. The day dragged on, filled with endless errands. As she picked up groceries, she placed items in the cart absent-mindedly, her mind somewhere far beyond the aisles of the store. In line, she overheard a mother lamenting about her child's disinterest in a routine activity they used to enjoy together. The familiar thread of guilt and expectations was woven through their exchange, the same fabric she had been trying to unravel in her own life. This external glimpse into another person's struggle felt illuminating yet haunting. How many women silently battled the same oppressive feelings of inadequacy? Driving home, the tension simmered within her, a strange blend of determination and fear. Halfway down her street, she saw a small sign in one of the neighborhood yards. Art class adult beginners welcome. Almost without thinking, she hit the brakes, her heart racing. Would this be another opportunity for improvement, another space for self-exploration? Nothing about it was directly connected to motherhood or managing a household, but it was a thread of a personal aspiration that had long been snipped in her busy life. The moment she stepped inside, a wave of uncertainty crashed over her. Sarah stood at the threshold, observing the group in animated conversation over canvases and colors, a beautiful tapestry of expression that starkly contrasted her own life. If she joined this class, then she would be confronting the very fabric of her self-doubt. It would mean associating herself with her own creative identity and daring to stand apart from the narratives dictated by societal standards. Could she balance this new pursuit without neglecting her responsibilities? The war of interior voices fought fiercely. Her responsibilities as a mother weighed heavily on one side, while the longing to explore her passions tugged insistently on the other. How would she manage both? The truth surfaced with painful clarity. Sarah was terrified of failing again, of spreading herself too thin with her ambitions. With a deep breath, she committed to the first step, walking toward the registration table with an air of determination that carried the echoes of the women's group behind her. Would embracing art transform her internal landscape? Could it help her bridge the gap between her roles and her true self? As the instructor began sketching out the day's agenda, Sarah took a seat. The class started with a simple but fundamental exercise, drawing with her non-dominant hand. The laughter and awkwardness surrounding her brought a comforting realization everyone was learning together, struggling with their respective flaws, just as they had in the group discussion. Each stroke of the pencil felt both absurd and liberating, turning into a conduit that released a gradual tide of emotion. It was an avenue for exploration, inviting her to reflect inward and confront long-buried dreams. Yet, just as the artist in her began to unfurl, a sudden thought paralleled her excitement, the looming question of how to involve her daughter in this new chapter. Would sharing her artistic journey enhance their bond or fail to meet expectations? The uncertainty gnawed at her. Further still, the whispers deep within her psyche murmured unsettling thoughts. Would a passion for art disrupt her already fragile family dynamic? The class ended with sketches around the room, each a unique reflection of its creator, much like their confessions during the support group. Sarah took a moment to breathe in that vibrant atmosphere, her heart racing with uncertainty and hope intermingling. But as she packed her bag, a revelation struck her: art could be a pathway, an expressive bridge to engage with her daughter, offering her a glimpse into Sarah's burgeoning identity. How could she infuse the vibrant chaos of creativity into their daily lives? The tantalizing possibility began to unfold in her mind, growing roots ready to blossom. Now, standing at the crossroads of understanding, she was left with an urgent revelation. Transforming herself did not just hinge upon personal exploration, but also through merging her passion with motherhood. What strides could they take together, and how might her newfound pursuit bind them? A fresh direction twinkled in her thoughts, setting off ripples of anticipation. The moment was approaching where she would have to bring this newfound clarity home and confront the fears of inadequacy that loomed there. Would it be the bridge she needed to navigate her identities? Or would it plunge her deeper into confusion? Sarah stepped into the kitchen, the air thick with the aroma of dinner. Her daughter, Ellie, was seated at the table, fingering the edges of her homework, her brow furrowed in concentration. The sight triggered a familiar wave of guilt. How often had Sarah felt she was balancing on a tightrope, her own desires pulling one way and her role as a mother tugging the other? She placed her bag down and settled into a chair across from Ellie, a sudden impulse igniting within her. Maybe this evening could mark the beginning of their creative venture together. Could the art class become a bridge? The thought felt thrilling and terrifying all at once. But would Ellie be receptive? Each possibility unfurled in her mind with agonizing detail. "Hey, sweetie," Sarah initiated, forcing a nonchalant tone. "How was school? What did you learn today?" "It was boring, as usual," Ellie replied, her eyes drifting away from her homework as if searching for distraction. "Boring, huh? What if we try something different tonight?" Sarah seized the moment, her pulse quickening. "How about we create an art project together instead of just homework?" Ellie's expression shifted, skepticism clouding her features. "Art? Like last time? When you filled the kitchen with paint? That was a mess." "I know, but messes are part of learning," Sarah countered, a hint of desperation underscoring her enthusiasm. "What if we painted our own version of a scene from your favorite book?" The thought of sharing this new aspect of herself with her daughter made her stomach churn, but she pressed on. She had to do this disrupt their routine, just enough to bring forth her newfound commitment to creativity. Ellie paused, considering. "Can we paint a scene from The Secret Garden? I love that part when Mary discovers the garden." "Yes." Sarah beamed, the momentum invigorating. "Let us make it colorful and wild, just like how you imagine it." As they gathered their supplies, a small voice within warned her about potential chaos. What if this turned into another reminder of her failures? But there was no turning back now. She needed to shift the narrative from one of fear and hesitance to one of exploration and growth. They set up their easels amid carefully placed newspapers on the kitchen floor, an obstacle Sarah planned to overcome one splash of paint at a time. But as she dipped her brush into the vibrant color, she hesitated, her heart fluttering. Would Ellie see this as another attempt to patch up their relationship or genuinely bond through creation? Could they both find satisfaction in the messiness of expression? Together, they began painting. Colors collided and patterns emerged, each stroke revealing glimpses into their thoughts and feelings. Laughter erupted as they accidentally mixed colors into muddy hues. Ellie's unfiltered joy made Sarah's heart swell. In those moments, she felt liberated from the self-doubt that had grazed her skin like fingers clenching around her throat. Each failed stroke was just a pivoting point to worsen or understand their dynamic better. "Your garden looks so wild," Ellie exclaimed, giggling as they both ended up splattered with shades of green and yellow. Yet, Beneath the surface thrill of their artistic rendezvous, a heaviness loomed over Sarah. Was this creative spark enough? Could she become the mom she envisioned? One who embraced her aspirations while nurturing Les? Would their evening together mark a turning point? Or would she find herself retreating again into familiar old fears next time chaos unfolded? As they painted until the twilight faded into the dusk, Sarah dared to ask, "How do you feel about us doing this more often?" "I like it. Can we paint something from and of Green Gables next?" Ellie chirped back, excitement brimming in her voice. A flicker of hope burst within Sarah's chest, quickening her resolve, yet she couldn't escape the shadow of doubt trailing after her. Perhaps they were stumbling towards something transformative, her fears whispered threateningly. She had to persist. However, could one evening's creativity unravel years of self-imposed restrictions? Here lay the crossroads. The questions lingered like heavy clouds in her mind. The creative threads tied to their relationship waited patiently to reveal deeper truths. But how far would she go to nurture this bond without immersing herself in chaos again? As their evening came to a close, she glanced at the paint-splattered canvases propped against the wall, bemused and proud. What had they forged in this messy intersection of art and life? A burgeoning revelation loomed. Could this act of creation define new norms for their relationship? Outside, the wind whispered, carrying with it the promise of transformation as Sarah's heart ached with newfound ambition and clarity. What awaited her just beyond the corner of their kitchen walls? A reckoning loomed. In pursuit of art and connection, would she risk losing parts of herself again? The sun rose on a new day, casting a warm light in the kitchen, illuminating the remnants of yesterday's art project. Sarah stood at the counter. Her heart swelled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The kitchen, once a battleground, had transformed into a space of creativity, and with it, a sanctuary of connection. Last night's messy venture had sparked something within her, igniting a small flame of potential she realized had been dormant for far too long. She looked at the colorful canvases hanging on the wall. Each brushstroke told a story, and on those canvases she could see the unfolding of her identity, intertwining with that of her daughter, Ellie. It symbolized a shift, a commitment to bridge their worlds through creativity and shared experiences. Sarah could finally visualize the mother she aspired to be, one who embraced her passions while nurturing her daughters. Today would not just be another day. It would symbolize a culmination of growth, challenge, and resolution. As she prepared breakfast, the aroma of pancakes filled the air, mixing with the sweetness of possibility. Sitting at the table, Ellie chirped about her favorite characters from books, her excitement spilling over and wrapping around Sarah like a warm embrace. Every giggle and shared moment strengthened Sarah's resolve. She would foster this bond relentlessly. After breakfast, Sarah gently broached a new idea. What if we host an art day for some of your friends? Ellie's eyes flickered with disbelief. Like a party? With painting? Yes, Sarah replied eagerly. We can create a space for you and your friends to explore art together like we did yesterday. No right or wrong, just fun. Ellie's enthusiasm was palpable, and Sarah felt an exhilarating rush. The prospect of sharing this experience not only with Ellie, but also with others offered a chance to spread joy and creativity, paving the way for deeper connections. It also represented the fulfillment of her own desires, stepping into the role of both mentor and mother, forging her identity beyond expectations. While planning for the art day, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The whispers of inadequacy were fading, replaced by a chorus of resilience. She began envisioning how to turn her creative journey into an avenue for both Ellie and her friends. Days passed, filled with preparations. With each detail, from gathering supplies to designing invitations, Sarah felt herself stepping further into her new identity. She challenged the doubts that ebbed and flowed, reminding herself that her efforts mattered. By the time the art day arrived, the atmosphere crackled with excitement, not just in the air, but in Sarah's heart. As the children arrived, the laughter and chatter enveloped Sarah in warmth. The room transitioned into a celebration of color and expression. She guided the kids through exercises, encouraging freedom of expression, and watchful parents eventually mingled in the back, eyeing the lively chaos with approving smiles. Yet amid the delight, Sarah experienced an unexpected encounter with her past, the specter of hesitation. What if she stumbled? Would this venture validate her efforts, or would it unravel throughout the day? But standing before the children, she recognized her evolution and glanced at Ellie, who was already absorbed in an assortment of paints. In that moment, the concerns fled. She began to understand that success was not defined by perfection, but rather by the willingness to engage, to share, and to connect, especially where it mattered most with Ellie. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting shadows that danced across the table, Sarah was met with a wave of accomplishment. The room bore the marks of creative chaos, each canvas a tousled reflection of joy. The laughter of children melded with the warmth of their conversations, and smiles radiated back and forth, a true tapestry of what they had achieved together that day. As the party wound down, parents expressed their gratitude, and Sarah was awash in the recognition she had sought, not just in the admiration of her peers, but through the genuine happiness emanating from her daughter. Ellie rushed to her with pride shining in her eyes. "Mom, that was the best day ever. You made it special," Sarah replied, the weight of affirmation settling around her heart. In that moment, she realized her transformation extended beyond personal achievement. It had forged a robust bond with Ellie. Returning home later that evening, feeling invigorated, Sarah glanced over the canvases once more. Each piece was not only a reminder of artistic expression, but a testament to her journey, a transformation intertwined with resilience, courage, and unmistakable growth. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michelle, one of the mothers from the art day. "You've created a beautiful space. Thank you for inspiring us." The words lit her up from within, confirming her evolution. Where once had been insecurities and fears, now flourished self-acceptance and intrinsic fulfillment. In confronting her obstacles, she conjured a narrative of growth that was no longer confined to her role as merely a mother, but as a vibrant individual eager to embrace her passions. With renewed determination, Sarah grasped the glimmering possibility of her path ahead. No longer would she allow doubt to dictate her narrative. She had confronted her hesitations and emerged victorious, ready to explore the creative life she had always envisioned. This was not an end, but a bright beginning. As her heart swelled with pride and wonder, Sarah embraced her identity fully, all parts of her confident in the knowledge that every step forward held the potential for deeper connections. She had transformed from the shadows of uncertainty to a beacon of achievement, prepared for whatever life might bring next. Now was the time to extend her journey beyond these walls, to share her art and foster creativity with the world, shaping the legacy of motherhood entwined with passion. Today defined her, but yesterday paved the way. It was a celebration, a testament to overcoming challenges and embracing her journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about this transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this heartwarming conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.